almost, like Cedric does.
Yeah.
So I think I like that change.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. Obviously, like it loses points against things like mono red.
Right.
But that's a deck that really, none of them top aided.
Right.
Not mono red aggro, I guess is what
right.
I'm saying. Mono red.
And a lot of the mono red decks are playing the like Thunderstrike, Shock, Magma Jet burn base, and not necessarily mortars.
Right.
And if they have to spend 2 removal spells for a Blood Baron, that's actually reasonable.
All right, and it looks like we are underway. So this is round 1, Max versus Cedric. Remember, Cedric is on a 6-card hand. And it looks like Max will be starting with a Temple of Deceit.
How cool are the Scry lands?
The Scry lands, we saw a lot of them. We saw a lot of them in the top 8. We even actually started seeing them. There was a mono black devotion deck that was playing, I believe, black-white Scry lands just for the Scries.
For value.
Yeah.
I love it. I mean, especially in the early game, being able to smooth out your draws, make it, less common for a player to just, miss their 3rd land drop and lose, or, draw 6 lands in their first 9 cards or what have you.
Yeah, and we saw Max there with potential to scry a card to the bottom. Cedric actually shocks on turn 2 to leave up 2 mana. His lands are a pair of shock lands, which suggests a counter spell or an Azorius Charm.
Yep. Azorius Charm. Cedric was always complaining that Azorius Charm wasn't good because it always drew a card. I said, that's awesome, though.
Yeah.
Draw your card. That's really good.
It does seem right now, in a lot of matchups, it does just cycle. I've seen some players playing fewer than 4 Azorius Charms right now as a result.
Yeah. The thing about Azorius Charm is, like, if it's bad, then it's just, a cycle. But if it's good, then it's such a huge tempo gain.
So the first play of the game there is going to be a Jace, Architect of Thought from Max, which is quickly dissolved by Cedric. And I think for you will be, can he respond with his own Jace?
Yes, that is ideal. And an untapped Shock does indicate that that's what we are going to see, and there it is.
All right, so Jace from Cedric, he's going to go ahead and choose to immediately get 3 cards off it. We see Detention Sphere, Doomblade, and Hero's Downfall.
The infamous 3-spell Jace.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how much Doomblade is a spell here, so he's probably, it's a choice between Detention Sphere and Downfall.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, when we look at Max's main deck, the only target for Doomblade is Aetherling, and I'm using the word target really loosely there.
Yeah, a little tempo gainer on Aetherling. You can kill an Elspeth token, how about that? That's a bargain.
Nonetheless, Cedric will go ahead and take the pile with the 2 removal spells, so now he has the Doomblade and the Hero's Downfall.
Yep.
He'll pass back the turn.
And this is, we saw this at the Block Pro Tour, the last one, of, Jace minus, and then untap minus, play another Jace, counter your Jace, untap into mine.
Yeah, one of the things we saw actually at the first, just a couple weeks ago at the Star City Open, was that this dynamic has changed a little bit with the new Legend rule. In the past, this would be an overwhelming advantage for Cedric.
Right.
But now, because Max's Jace gets to resolve, it's actually a situation that Max it's easier for him to come back from.
Yeah, he can actually catch up a little, which is nice. So he's not just instantly buried. And we do see a -2 here, 2 lands and a far away.
Yeah, and I like how a lot of people will go spell in 2 lands. I think Cedric is really correctly noting how important lands are in this matchup and makes sure to separate both lands.
Yeah, it would have been far too easy for Max to take the 2-land pile. And, with those Jace minuses, you kind of want to make him make a difficult decision. If it's too easy for him, you probably split it wrong.
So, as you said, Jace goes ahead and minuses into Divination, Temple of Deceit, and Thoughtseize. Thoughtseize is going to be separated from the 2, so Cedric can either really choose to have 3, that Thoughtseize is going to cost him 3 cards if he takes it.
Right.
Thoughtseize is pretty good in this mirror match, so we might see him take it anyway, but...
And especially because Max is splitting a Thoughtseize away, you have to be a little suspicious. He's got something that he doesn't want taken.
Yeah, I think he's protecting a Sphinx's Revelation in his hand.
That makes sense.
Cedric goes and takes the 2 cards anyway.
The 2/3 card pile.
The 3 card pile. I'm not sure how much, what spells really need to be protected in this matchup.
It's basically just Revelation, Revelation and Aetherling, I suppose.
So just going to main phase Hero's Downfall on the Jace. That does open him up to getting Aetherling into here. Well, he couldn't have the mana up, so I guess there's no real scary play. I guess he could be worried about an Elspeth in this situation.
Yeah, that would be probably the scariest card that Max could muster here. but both players with a full grip, Max is actually going to get 3 more. This is, we're entering the end game.
Yeah. So, okay, so when you say we're entering the end game, how does that, tell me more about that.
Okay, well, the early game in these control mirrors is basically just cycling and making land drops. The mid game is sort of this little sparring battles of Jaces, you know, on the 4th, 5th, and 6th turns. Then, once we enter the end game, it's where both players have plenty of mana, plenty of cards in hand, and it becomes a much more tactical battle and a much more drawn-out battle.
Okay, so the goals of each player in this late game is really, I almost want to say, like, just to continue to make land drops?
Yes, continue to make land drops, and it gets a lot scarier to ever, you know, invest the turn's worth of mana into anything, because the Sphinx's Revelations are much bigger, much scarier, and it's possible for a player to play, you know, a threat and have a counter spell up, stuff like that, as more and more land drops are made. So it becomes more and more of a tenuous position to not want to tap out.
Yeah, we're seeing Max actually, he has an Ashiok, which I think he's going to go for here. He's a little worried about tapping out for it. So last time we saw Max Revelation for 3, he did discard off that Revelation, but it was a Doomblade, so not
really a card.
Yeah. And now we see the first attempt to commit a threat. This is going to be Ashiok from Max. It looks like it will resolve. It mills Cedric for 3, hitting two of Cedric's Revelations. Remember, he only plays 3, so that means there's only 1 Revelation left in his deck.
Yeah, and with Snapcaster rotated out,
right,
that means that Cedric will be casting Sphinx's Revelation maximum 1 time this game.
Yeah, he has, what, 1 Divination, 2 Jaces, and 1 Revelation left for card draw?
Yeah. So it's actually, you know, that isn't the goal of Ashiok, to like
mill out. Right. You don't mill someone to get rid of their win cons typically.
Right, but now that we're in this situation, Cedric, the onus to win is actually like pretty big, right? Like the burden is on Cedric to sort of close the game out, because as you go long, Max's deck is so much more threat dense with these super relevant cards. Now that 3 of the 8 or so.
Yeah, there were 9 main deck draw spells for Cedric. He used 2 already, and that's 3 more, so only 4 remain.
Yeah.
And we will see Ashiok is going to get Detention Sphered. Max, his only counterspell in hand is an Essence Scatter. I doubt he would fight over this spell anyway.
Yeah. Doesn't seem like the spot you want to fight, you know. Your Ashiok is probably going to die anyway. You got pretty good value out of it.
We see a Godless Shrine to the bottom from the Temple of Silence out of Cedric, and he'll pass back.
Syncopate drawn from Max, and now we're starting to see the leaning of that Sphinx's Revelation for 3 that we saw on turn 6. Max is still pretty full, and Cedric's starting to lose cards.
And Max is just going to go ahead and jam for an Aetherling here. It's a
aggressive.
very aggressive play.
Aggressive. He's so far ahead that it's actually probably fine.
And it's going to get Doombladed by Cedric, so he needs to have triple kill spell to get it here.
Yes. Which I'm sure he does, but that's quite an investment.
Yeah, so for counterspells, Cedric plays 2 Dissolve, one of which he's already used, and that's actually it in the main.
Yeah, he cut a lot of the counter magic for more of the 1-for-1 removal.
Yep.
And but 1-for-1 removal not as effective against Aetherling.
Second Doomblade and Hero's Downfall. So he manages to get the Aetherling off the table at the investment of 5 main phase mana and 3 cards.
Yes. Even when Aetherling dies, which doesn't happen often, it's still quite profitable.
That's it though. It looks like Max's hand is a little out of action. He has a Detention Sphere, Hero's Downfall, Far Away, Syncopate, Supreme Verdict. So he can just deal with things, but he doesn't seem to have any card draw or threats.
Yeah, no juice. You gotta have juice. And that's exactly what Cedric needs, is for Max to draw, you know, the deadish half of his deck while he pulls back out of it.
So I need to stand corrected. There was 1 card draw spell in his hand, and it's a good one. It's another Jace Architect of Thought.
And down we go.
And we see
Elspeth, Sphinx's Revelation, and a land.
So Cedric is going to go ahead and put that Revelation off to the side. While Elspeth's a pretty hard card to deal with, I think Revelation's harder to deal with there. That looks like the correct split.
Yeah, I agree. Max does take the 2 cards instead of the 1. He doesn't know that Cedric's so skimping on counter magic, so Got to get value while you can. And there's the one Sphinx's Revelation for Cedric. That
Right. So yeah, he does have, yes, he does have the one Sphinx's Rev. It looks like he still has, I think, four or five cards in his hand.
Yeah, something like that. He's definitely behind now, but that one Sphinx's Revelation was a huge draw for him. If he can get that down, then it looks really good for him. But if Max, is careful, leaves up the Syncopate for it, then it's going to be hard for Cedric to pull back out.
Both players here with, looks like 10 lands, well sorry, 9 for Max, they'll be playing a 10th this turn. So no players missed a land drop. You see the second minus from Jace hits an Azorius Charm and 2 more lands.
Yeah, I mean, if you count the number of Jace activations per player, then you're fairly often going to, be able to determine the winner without actually seeing life scores.
Which means that's actually just like 2 divinations, right?
Yeah. And now Max has to decide in what manner he wants to close out the game.
Yeah,
Is it Elspeth? Do you lead with it here? Do you wait?
What I find interesting is Max actually has a 9-card hand right now. This is where Esper, for me at least, Esper matchups get a little difficult because it's hard to determine what exactly you want to be discarding.
Right. Or if you want to be spending cards so that you don't have to discard.
It's like, yeah, the system you almost don't want to cast your divination because you have 7 cards in hand.
Yeah. It used to happen a lot with Think Twice. You just leave the Think Twice in your graveyard. You don't flash it back because you'll have to discard.
So Elspeth hits the table. It is going to resolve.
And Cedric takes the opportunity to land that Revelation for 4, playing under the Syncopate.
Yeah, I think he was playing under the Syncopate. He was also digging for a Dissolve in that situation. He left 3 up. So now remember, Cedric has no more Revelations in his deck.
Yeah, he's going to have to win from this spot.
So his late game are Blood Baron of Viscopas, which, at least on the current board, are difficult to resolve, difficult to make impactful. We know that Max, Elspeth can kill them actually, despite the fact that they're pro-white. Also, he has a Supreme Verdict.
Right. It looked like Max did discard a Supreme Verdict, but probably has another one. Probably not too scared at this point with an Elspeth in play. And now Cedric has to sort of navigate his way from this point. Starting with the Hero's Downfall on Elspeth, that is certainly step 1.
Yeah, step 1 is to get the Planeswalker off the table.
Yes.
Looks like Max is debating a counterspell here. He chooses not to pull the trigger on it, so Elspeth goes down.
Yeah, you already have your tokens.
And I love that thing where he has a hand full of counterspells, and he just doesn't use any of them.
Yeah. That's the exact spot you want to be in as an Esper player. Handful of counters that you don't even have to use.
3-mana Divination, so Cedric's going to go ahead and hit. Max lets that resolve. At some point, if I'm Max, I'm wondering whether Max will start countering spells like Divination, just because I'm not sure what he is holding all the counter magic for.
Right. Well, one of his pieces of counter magic is an Essence Scatter, so that's pretty targeted towards a Blood Baron, right? And then he's got
or possible Aetherling, because remember, he doesn't actually know Cedric's threats. I think you're right, though. It'll probably hit a Blood Baron.
And then a couple of Syncopates that are a little hard to necessarily get off, depending on how Cedric sequences.
Yeah.
But now that he's untapped with a threat on board, he no longer needs to tap any mana on his main phase ever again.
Right, Syncopate's normally a great weapon against Sphinx's Revelation, but as we know, Cedric has 3 Sphinx's Revelations gone already.
Yes.
Most players only play 3, so Max could put Cedric on 0 to 1 Revelations remaining.
Right. And it looks like an Ashiok, another sort of cheap threat here that forces Cedric to deal with more stuff on board through all of this counter magic.
Right, so so this pre-board Esper matchup, it's pretty interesting. It seems like both players have about 7 threats, and it doesn't. I was trying to describe the game. State with it. Max really seems to be pulling ahead, though it's hard to pinpoint exactly where that's happening.
Yeah, and we actually just see the Ashiok hit Cedric's 1 Aetherling, which is double scary because now Cedric doesn't have his Aetherling, and because Max is 2 turns away from stealing it. Although
he doesn't want to activate it if he steals it.
Yeah, it is just a 4/5 pumper, but that is yet another thing that Cedric will have to deal with.
So Cedric's he's gonna cast a Thoughtseize here. That's a card which typically is pretty good in the Esper Mirror. So we see Max's hand of 3 counter spells, two Syncopates and an Essence Scatter, a Far Away, a Hero's Downfall, and a Detention Sphere. So
not a bad hand.
Lots of answers. If you're Cedric, the only win cons left in his deck are those Blood Barons, so he's got to clear the way for Blood Barons, which would be taking away things like Essence Scatter or Far Away,
Right.
or even Syncopate. It's going to be pretty hard to resolve a Blood Baron in this situation.
Yeah, this is definitely a rough spot for Cedric. He's got to navigate this pretty narrowly. That is his second Thoughtseize, right? The other is on the bottom of his library. So he doesn't have the luxury of, taking the counters that way. He's going to have to make Max use them at some point. But he doesn't have enough threats, really.
Right, so he goes ahead and takes one Syncopate, but there's still another Syncopate waiting in the wings for Max.
So if you're Cedric, how do you navigate this? You have to trick him into using counters, right?
Yeah, you have to bait him into using counters, I would think. You can try to plus... Yeah, so you want to, I guess you can use your Jaces as bait. That's really the only spell that I think it's reasonable to bait him into using.
Yeah.
Using one on.
Yeah, and we've seen Max, not blink at a couple of otherwise irrelevant cards, so it doesn't look like he's necessarily going to, as he didn't even fight over that Detention Sphere on the Ashiok.
Right, so his board's clear again. Cedric takes 3 more. He's going to go down to 11. Yeah, Detention Sphere, the draw there for Max, I believe.
More and more answers. The rich get richer.
Yeah, he just has a lot of really generic answers. And that's one of the interesting things about Esper right now, is that I think its removal spells are so generic.
Yeah. Yeah, they're very versatile. I mean, any type of threat, Esper can answer.
Yeah, you have Detention Sphere, you have Far Away, you have Hero's Downfall. Like, those together take care of most any permanent.
Not to mention counter magic.
Right, not to mention counter spells.
The most versatile removal in Magic history.
All right, so let's see if we can if he gets a bait out of here. He's going to go ahead and cast Jace, Architect of Thought. Max counting Cedric's mana, which means he's possibly thinking about syncopating this.
And he correctly identifies that he can just Hero's Downfall that. Only a certain number of cards actually matter from Cedric here, and those cards are threats.
Yeah, Cedric nets 2 Supreme Verdicts off this Jace. He's going to go ahead and cast them to take care of the Soldier tokens. And indications are Max is going to end step Hero's Downfall this guy.
Yes, so now we've reached a fairly equalized position. The difference is Max is a little up on cards, and 2, and far more importantly, Cedric is very light on threats, thanks to a couple of Ashiok, surgical hits on some key cards.
Yeah, Max still has 2 Aetherlings and 1 Elspeth remaining in his deck. Cedric has 3 Blood Barons, so they actually both have 3 threats remaining.
Yeah.
It does seem like Max just has 1 Aetherling, so he only has 2 threats remaining. Because we actually saw an Aetherling get killed.
Right, an Aetherling's been killed. Cedric has 2 Blood Barons, and that's
so it's 2 and 2 for each player? Yeah, he has 2, not 3. I want to see both players playing land go here. This is one of the situations where you want to start counting your opponent's library. I believe Max has drawn more cards this game, but I can't say...
he's also activated 2 Ashioks.
That's true, so it's almost certain that Cedric's deck is smaller here.
I would think that it would be by a couple cards, yeah.
So Cedric, actually, with that Hero's Downfall, he was able to bait out one of the removal spells that can... No, sorry, that spell can't hit Blood Baron.
Yeah.
So he probably wasn't completely happy with what...
No, he wanted a Syncopate on that Jace, for sure. But Max, had the discipline to just let him get an activation, use the Hero's Downfall, save the more versatile... And looks like another Sphinx's Rev for Max. Ooh, Jace for Cedric, so...
And if this resolves, I imagine we'll see Cedric start to plus the Jace here.
Yeah, it is definitely possible. Looks like we are going to see a Revelation.
It's going to Revelation for 3. I'm not sure what he's digging for in this situation. Maybe perhaps a Hero's Downfall. It's for 6, actually.
That is a big revelation. So now, Max is saying with this revelation that he is going to try and kill Cedric. He's not decking him. He is going to try and kill him.
I'm a little surprised by that line right now, just because I felt like Max had enough control in his hand to really deal with anything Cedric could do, that he might be letting go of that advantage.
Yeah.
these extra cards are good. I don't know what he's actually, I feel like there needs to be something he's specifically looking for.
And you are correct. We do see a plus from the Jace of Cedric Phillips. So, game on. This is the game plan.
I mean, and Cedric knows this isn't gonna resolve. Like this plan of plussing Jace to 7 and ulting, it's not gonna work.
Right.
And I think Cedric's very aware of that. He's just trying to get something here. Like he's trying to just get a card out of Max's hand.
Yeah. It's a Hail Mary,
Yeah.
When you're behind, you gotta do crazy things to try and equalize.
We do see 6, so that's gonna be the second Aetherling from Max. And now a counter war will commence. This is counter war is great for Max because Cedric I think is wary of getting in a counter war on his own turn because then Max resolves Aetherling. There's nothing that Cedric could resolve here that Max can't untap and answer.
Exactly. And we know that Cedric actually doesn't have that many counter spells in his deck.
Yeah.
And with that knowledge, we know that Aetherling is very likely to resolve and very hard to deal with this much mana available to Max.
Yeah, so Max discarding a whole slew of cards, including a lot of far and aways. Cedric, it's going to go ahead and scoop to this Aetherling. And that'll give Max Mendelsohn the first game.
Yeah, that was a really interesting game. We saw the sort of Jace, like standard Jace mid game. Ashiok came down, hit hard on the first activation.
Right.
And that sort of forced Cedric into a position where he had to play a little more aggressively, I suppose, and was not going to win the end game.
Yeah, it seemed like once they got into top deck mode that Max's threats were better positioned for the matchup.
Yeah.
Cedric could top deck a Blood Baron, but Max was always waiting in the wings with something like 4 answers to it, whereas when Max would cast an Ashiok, not only would it get to resolve, but then it would take some of Cedric's threats.
Yeah, it would hit Cedric once, and then Cedric would have to, play a Detention Sphere on his own turn, which then gave Max the mana advantage on his next turn. Just everything lined up really, really well for Max that game, and Cedric, didn't have much hope.
So this game matchup, as most control mirrors do, changes a lot post-sideboard. Why don't we go ahead and start with Cedric, since he's the one who's going to have to be catching up here. First of all, what options are available in the sideboard? And, second, I guess, he wants to be cognizant of the fact that there's only 20 minutes remaining in the round.
Yep, you're going to have to kill your opponent, especially down a game. And we do see a second copy of Aetherling, the third and fourth Blood Barons, which I would not be surprised to see him bring in. He also has 4 Nightveil Spectre, which is an interesting card because it sort of plays the role of a Super Ophidian that is hard to answer without being at least mana equal. There's no 1 or 2 mana answer to a Nightveil Spectre.
Yeah, Nightveil Spectre is a card that we saw first see playing control mirrors in block. And I think it fits the bill. It's a 3 mana spell, so that's just, you don't really want to be paying too much more mana for it, but it actually does demand an answer. It's black, so it can't be Doombladed, so its answers are all going to be 3 mana at least to deal with it.
Right, so to prevent a Spectre from getting a hit in, say Cedric plays the Nightveil Spectre, Max then has to untap, play his 3rd land, and play, a Hero's Downfall or Detention Sphere or what have you. Then Cedric is free to play a Jace on his 4th turn, or another Nightveil Spectre, or something else like that. So it's a really good start to a curve out to really put the opponent under pressure. Plus, if they don't answer it, it's just super efficient and awesome.
Yeah, so it looks like Cedric actually has a lot for this matchup. He has the Spectres, he has an extra Thoughtseize, he has negates and gainsays. So
negates and gainsays, yeah.
So have a lot of counter magic post-board.
Yes. There are so many dead cards or semi-dead cards in these matchups in the main decks that you have to dedicate a fair amount of your sideboard to be able to get them all out of your deck.
It's conceivable that Cedric boards in all 15 cards in this matchup. He has Pithing Needles, an extra Aetherling. I don't see a card that's bad here. I don't know how many slots he has to get rid of, but it's actually somewhat reasonable that he boards in all 15.
Yeah, that is not out of the realm of possibility. I mean, you definitely have to get these Doomblades out of your deck, and these Supreme Verdicts are also pretty terrible. So that's already 8 slots.
Yeah, and I don't really like Azorius Charm in the matchup either.
Azorius Charm is mediocre at best. So yeah, it is definitely possible for a big sort of semi-transformational sideboard to a sort of fish-esque deck post-board.
So now, while Cedric becomes more of a control deck post-board, I feel like Max, if you look at his sideboard, becomes more of a tap-out deck. He has a pair of Sin Collectors to bring in, which have always been very good in this matchup.
Yeah.
He also has a Jace Memory Adept to bring in the matchup, so he's going to have just even more Planeswalker threat. He does not... He only has one Gainsay and one Negate in his board, so I think his amount of counter magic he has will largely stay the same.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because Jace Memory Adept used to be the sort of go-to answer or the go-to threat for these post-board games of these types of matchups when it was, Drown Yard on Drown Yard. But with Hero's Demise, I don't know actually how effective it is necessarily.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still... You're still likely getting a 2-for-1 out of it, but it's no longer the win condition that it used to be.
Yeah, I think it is that same thing we were describing with Elspeth. One player can tap out, and the other player can just say end step downfall it.
Yeah,
which
untap, do something awesome.
Yeah, downfall and untap, do something awesome where you're a little wary of playing Jace. I see a lot of players in the control mirror will play Jace Memory Adept, and the first thing they'll do is they'll plus it as opposed to zeroing it, just kind of saying, okay, I want to see if you have the kill spell for it.
Get your card economy, settled before you try and kill the opponent. I like that.
All right, so on the play, we have
looks like Cedric actually chose
Cedric
to draw
chose to draw in this right now.
Pretty awesome.
All right.
I like it a lot. I mean, there's no real way to kill fast, and with Thoughtseizes, it's more reasonable to want to curve out a turn behind.
Yeah, and I think
I don't mind this at all. I like it.
It certainly is close. And in a certain sense, I think Max is the aggressor here. He has the plan of Thoughtseize and drop Planeswalkers, where Cedric has the control spells. But Cedric will actually make the first aggressive play here in Nightveil Spectre.
Yeah, and this is one reason that you wouldn't want to draw first. Say that Max's card or land came into play untapped. Cedric would play the Nightveil Spectre. Max would be able to kill it and untap, and that wouldn't have been good. But this is much better for Cedric.
Max had the option of Heroes downfalling there on the Spectre, but instead he chose to play Ashiok. I think he's going to be punished for that decision right now.
Yeah, and we see it happening before our very eyes. A Thoughtseize off the Nightveil Spectre. So quite brutal. 3
Heroes downfalls, a Aetherling, and a Sphinx's Revelation.
A pretty good hand, but a pretty Thoughtseizable hand, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, the worry here, I think, about not downfalling the Spectre is that Cedric will now that he knows the coast is clear, if Cedric has a downfall or a detention sphere, he'll just play it on the Ashiok and then really be up on the board because he's gotten a free card.
Yep.
Yeah, and he goes and takes the Aetherling. There's no way to protect his Nightveil Spectre through 3 kill spells.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely, and there we see Detention Sphere on Ashiok. It is definitely a decision between Aetherling and Sphinx's Revelation, and it just matters on the sort of texture of Cedric's hand, which is easier for him to deal with as the game progresses.
And just as a note, that's a Detention Sphere removing the Ashiok. It is not a Detention Sphere exiled with Ashiok. So the 5's not actually there anymore.
Yeah, that is gone into the Aether. And so now we see another Scry land from Max. That's actually a good draw. He was going to miss that land drop, and then Hero's Downfall while Cedric's tapped out. Yeah. And now Cedric's turn to punish him.
Right, so Cedric gets to play with perfect information here, and he very quickly plays a Jace -2, shows another copy of Jace, and then the land of Nightveil Spectre.
And the snowball begins rolling.
Yeah, I think what Cedric's plan here to do is use cards like Nightveil Spectre to bait removal from Max's hand, and then never let Max resolve that Sphinx's Revelation.
Yep. That's a pretty good plan.
Yeah, if Cedric can counter that Revelation, things are going to be very difficult for Max.
Yep, and we do see the second Hero's Downfall on the Jace. The third one, sort of, already spoken for with the Nightveil Spectre that we know is in Cedric's hand.
Yeah, so Spectre's great here. In the same way that Ashiok's great, Spectre's really good. Cedric can tap out for it and still play a counter spell. Shocks on his third land, which is a clear representation of a dissolve.
Yes.
we do Cedric knowing the thing's gonna die. Max actually has a decision now, though. He did draw Elspeth Sun's Champion here.
All right, so maybe you just go for it here. I like it.
Well, I think if Max feels he's really down on the current board, becomes the better play.
This is the Hail Mary.
Yeah, I mean, he probably doesn't expect this to resolve. Cedric went for a Zoria's Charm instead of a counter spell, though.
Oh, instead of a counter spell or a Hero's Downfall.
Or a Hero's Downfall,
That is
right.
interesting. It looks like he has a Detention Sphere, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
Thanks for the land.
Yeah, Cedric correctly hits with Night Veil Spectre before making a land drop.
Yes. The number of times I've seen people do that wrong on Moto, on Magic Online, is pretty
is a
insane.
few.
Yeah. If only I had a nickel.
All right, and as called, second Detention Sphere on another Planeswalker. Max drawing his own Detention Sphere. He now has an answer yet again to Night Veil Spectre. He has to decide whether to downfall it or sphere it.
Probably Sphere, right?
Well, Sphere's a sorcery, and I don't think he needs... It doesn't seem like he needs the instant speed right now.
Exactly.
Max does have a bit of a clock right now. He has 3 soldiers, so Cedric's going to have to find a way to deal with those.
Oh, he's just going to start with a Rev for 3.
Yeah,
He knows that Cedric likely doesn't have a counterspell because Elspeth resolves so quickly. So that's reasonable.
And Max drew 3 lands off that Revelation and Scry to the bottom. That's an interesting decision. By playing Revelation there, though, he did draw Cedric another card. Because
Right.
Cedric... Well, I guess possibly drew Cedric another
Yes.
card. You know,
A
Cedric hits
theoretical fraction of a card.
Well, I mean, the scary thing is if the Night Veil Spectre hits something like a counterspell, that's really bad for Max.
Yes. Yeah, when Night Veil Spectre was hitting last turn, if it hit, say, a Hero's Downfall or Detention Sphere for the Elspeth, that would have been devastating. It hit a land. Now we get to see
And it's going to go ahead and hit
another land. All
another
right.
land. You never are unhappy as a control player to see that happen.
No, free cards are free cards. Extra lands are extra lands, you know?
Yeah.
Everyone's happy.
We do see Cedric has a Gainsay in his hand right now, so he has at least 1 counterspell he's sitting on.
All right.
Interesting, he's not playing the Temple of Deceit, though. He's going to go ahead and
Slam Aetherling.
push a little bit harder. Max is tapped out. Cedric has double blue up. Decides it's a good time for Aetherling. Is this a concession, you think, to the fact that Cedric's at 9 and wants to stabilize, or more to the fact that there's 18 minutes in the round?
I think the clock is a big concern here, and with Max revving for 3 last turn, it becomes a lot scarier for Cedric. Even though Cedric was like very far ahead.
Yeah, he
the
could have just
game-
sat back, right?
Right. Like he could have been a little scared of the game equalizing, and he wanted to close it out before that happened.
Yeah. Also, he was a little lacking in control.
Yeah.
He's left with Gainsay, Revelation, and the land. Max picks a Revelation instead of a Gainsay. It's a close decision there.
Yeah. I think it's fine. It's make Cedric kill you with the 1 Revelation. That's fine.
Cedric's draw for turn is a Hero's Downfall.
Pretty
now,
good one.
Now we'll see the clock of Aetherling start. Remember, Cedric knows Max has at least 1 Hero's Downfall, so he can gain some life with that card.
Yeah.
Cedric, it looks like he's going to leave back Night Veil Spectre as a blocker, so that he has to be a little concerned about his own life total. He's at 7 right now.
Yep. No reason to die in a stupid race situation when you're really far ahead. Play a little more conservatively, nothing wrong with that. Now he's going to blink out the Aetherling for pseudo-vigilance. Now he has 2 blockers to 3 attackers at 7 life. Cedric very much in command of this game. The question is whether he can close it out quickly enough for a 3rd game.
Yeah.
Ashiok drawn for Max.
So 3rd Planeswalker. I don't know. We know that Cedric has a Hero's Downfall for it.
He also has a Gainsay. Looks like he's going to use it. Interesting choice.
Yeah, explain. Yeah, what are your thoughts on using the Gainsay there instead of the Downfall?
Not a huge fan. I think that it's probably a time consideration.
It leaves him open to Sphinx's Revelation, right?
Correct. As well as Max's own Aetherling and a bunch of tempo gainers.
I almost feel like the way that Max can win this game is if he pulls off. Say if Cedric puts him down to 5 and Max just pulls off Revelation for 7. That's how Max gets it from here, right?
Agreed completely. I think that it was more a time concern than anything else. Either to finish the game faster, or also just because Cedric's trying to play quickly and, made a slight misevaluation there.
Well, the good news for Cedric is that Max doesn't have the Revelation yet. He's going to have to top deck it if that's
right.
If that happens.
And he only has a turn to do it. So
yeah,
Cedric's still in a pretty good spot.
So Max aggressively uses the last Hero's Downfall in his hand to fade out the Aetherling and swing in for 4. That puts Cedric down to 3 life, meaning that Cedric has to leave back the Aetherling as a blocker, which isn't really a problem.
Yeah, he could just blink it out if he really wants to attack, but he can also just cast this revelation.
Cedric shows the revelation, which Max actually knew about there.
From the Sin Collector, yep.
Right. You know, he didn't have an answer for it. I think by playing his last card there, he let Cedric be certain when he casted.
Yep, and now we got to do the fun game of whose cards are whose with Detention Spheres and Night Veil Specters.
There was a Thoughtseize. When Cedric stole the Thoughtseize and Max, it found its way into Cedric's graveyard.
Well, thankfully they're using different sleeves.
so
this is a quick...
he's going to find another one in his graveyard in just 1 second here, actually. Fortunately, neither deck's playing Snapcaster Mage or anything like Spell Heart's Chimera, so, you know, there's nothing that... Nothing that actually cares.
Right.
Yeah, so...
That was a fun little dance. I like that.
Yeah, I thought that's a really impressive... I mean, Night Veil Spectre is really impressive in the matchup, though, and I think that's something we saw game 2.
Absolutely. It lets you take such a different approach to the matchup, too. Besides just its raw power level, also it just lets you play this sort of fish-esque, like, counter slivers type of aggro control deck, like the Delver decks of yore, almost, where you can play a cheap threat and then have counters, and then if they can deal with your threat through your counters, then you reload with the top end, the Sphinx Revelation, the Aetherling.
So I want to take you back in that game to a play which I kind of feel like, you know, was like a pivotal spot in the game. That's all the way back to turn 4 of Max's, where turn 4, where Cedric has just cast a Night Veil Spectre, Max is and he decides to go for Ashiok, land into play tapped, as opposed to Hero's Downfall, land into play tapped. Yeah,
I think that was probably a misevaluation on Max's end. I would say that it's sort of a default thing to think of your Planeswalker as your important card in the matchup.
Absolutely, they're great in control mirrors, right?
Exactly. But not only is that sort of limited by the existence of Hero's Downfall, but also, you know, Cedric has a pseudo Planeswalker of his own in play in the form of Night Veil Spectre that's a little more high impact than the Ashiok at the time. And I think that it's more important to get the Night Veil Spectre off the board, and you can save the Ashiok for later. It's not a huge deal that Cedric's tapped out. If Cedric wants to use a counter spell on the Ashiok later, you're probably pretty happy with that exchange as well.
Unlike most control mirrors, it seems to me that, you know, at least on the first 5 turns of the game, tapping out isn't that scary of a thing to do.
I would agree. I think that's lent to by the versatility of the answer suit that these decks have. Like, since you have Detention Sphere and Hero's Downfall, it doesn't matter if they land a Planeswalker, a legendary enchantment artifact god.
There's not much they can land that.
Yeah. You can deal with just about any permanent type. So it's more important to sort of worry about your own proactive game plan and push yourself into an advantage where you can then capitalize it on the mid game and go into the end game with a huge advantage, or an already won game.
There's no like Geist of St. Traft style card that you have to counter.
Exactly. There's no Jace the Mind Sculptor, you know, without any answers.
All right, game 3, Max. So both players agree that Max should be on the play. This time, Max chose it instead of Cedric.
Well, when one player chooses to play or draw and the other one chooses the opposite, one of them is wrong.
Now, Max has kept...
By definition, one of them has to be wrong.
Yeah, because the game state's favorable for one player.
Right.
One of them's better.
I have no idea who it is.
Oh my! And Max kept a very aggressive hand. He kept Jace and all lands. It looks like Max was down a card. It looks like he was on a mull to 6
here.
Yeah,
he mulled on the play and kept 5 lands Jace.
It's not a terrible hand to keep. I mean, obviously the hand is made a lot worse by Thoughtseize.
Yes, that is a very Thoughtseizable hand.
Cedric's gonna go for this Night Veil Spectre, and that top deck dissolved.
Yep. Hey, wait a minute, you didn't have that a second ago. Well, Max did play a Shockland untapped, so I'm pretty sure Cedric knew what was up, but you gotta go through it somehow. And that was Sphinx Revelation for Max. Yeah, so Max drawn pretty well this game.
So
untapped.
He's shocking there. Is he gonna... I can't imagine he's gonna Revelation for 1.
No, I wouldn't think so. And I don't know what the 4th mana represents, but... trying to represent something, trying to get some sort of advantage.
And Cedric Jaces into 3 lands here. Max doesn't know. I think you put the Shockland. I think basics are better than Shocklands here, so I think you put the Shocklands together.
Yeah. But I don't think it really matters.
Cedric's taking the pile of 2, no matter what.
Yeah, exactly. I'll take 2 cards, please.
And speaking of Jace, Max has his own Jace.
Oh, daddy. Big Jace.
So the question here, do you +1 or do you 0?
This is that situation where I think you go card economy first, equalize, get your 2 for 1.
Max once again mills one of Cedric's Sphinx's Revelations.
He's like a surgeon with those things.
Cedric into a replacement Jason, Aetherling, and 2 lands. Cedric
like
immediately
Factor
takes the Aetherling.
It's like Factor Fiction, they find each other.
Yeah. So, but this time Cedric looks like he wants to make the game go quicker, taking the Aetherling there. He's going to Hero's Downfall the Jace, play a land untapped. Max is really, his draws have really let him get back in this game. Cedric's representing a gainsay here, so Max, it'd be interesting to see if Max wants to just go for this Revelation for 3. It looks like he is going to.
Yeah, it looks like that's what's happening next. The question is negate or gainsay, and there it is.
So Max just left with the Hero's Downfall in his hand. He is now out of ammo and tapped out. This is a good situation if you're Cedric.
Fistful of cards. He's going to start with a Jace.
Yeah, I think in this situation he would have preferred to get something like a Night Veil Spectre, but instead he's just going to bury Max behind a wall of counter spells.
Yep, and that is a pretty good -2 there. Another Jace, Architect, and Gainsay, and Detention.
If I'm Cedric, I almost think the most important card here is Gainsay.
I would agree. I think the Sphinx's Revelation is one of the very few ways. Sphinx's Revelation and Aetherling are like the 2 ways that Max could theoretically get out of this, and Gainsay answers them both.
Yeah, I don't know if Cedric has an answer for Elspeth yet. He wants to make sure that his hand has an answer to Elspeth.
That is also true.
But I think once he has that, that's the only non-blue card he cares about.
Right.
And so this is the scary turn. What can, for Max, what can he resolve? He gets a Revelation and 2 cards. Cedric will, Max will take the Revelation off it.
Yep.
He used the Temple there to actually scribe before minusing the Jace, which is an interesting, kind of a cute decision there.
Yeah.
And both players here playing at breakneck speed. Cedric flipping 2 lands and a Divination. Do you want 2 cards? Do you want your Divination to hit 2 lands, or do you want to try again with your Divination? Is really, I think, the decision he has to make here.
It's the weirdest Petals of Insight.
Yeah, I mean, right. That is just like, okay, do you want 2 cards or 2 lands?
Yeah. All right, and gonna answer. Oh no, he's gonna
just cast the Divination.
All right.
And he's hit a Dissolve, so he now has that counter spell. And he's going to let Max activate, once again, that Jace.
Sin Collector's a good hit, too.
Yeah, Max is getting back into this game. I thought Cedric was closing this out, but it's turning around.
Yeah. That is certainly true.
So we see 2 Aetherlings. 2 Aetherlings, an Azorius Charm, a Gainsay, and a Dissolve. I'm a little surprised to see the Azorius Charm still in right now.
I'm sure he shaved a couple.
Yeah, I'm sure not all 4 are in.
Yeah. And now we get to formulate a game plan as Max. How do I get through this hand?
Well, he certainly takes one of the counter spells. I don't think he cares at all about the charm.
Yep.
I think he's going to get rid of the generic one, which is probably right to himself.
Yep.
And now I would almost say that Max is ahead.
It's definitely a lot closer. We know that Cedric still has the Gainsay for Max's Sphinx's Revelation.
Yeah, but with his Elspeth, he has no answer for it, and Max knows it.
Yeah.
So he's going to use the Azorius Charm to cycle, and instead he looks like he hit a Sphinx's Revelation off that.
That's a pretty good hit.
It could be a Supreme Verdict.
I don't think that's in his deck.
I don't think it's still in his deck.
Thoughtseize, something like that. And we do see another counter for Cedric.
Yeah, he has another Dissolve. So he's going to go ahead and cast Night Veil Spectre.
Ah, yes. The Spectre.
That may have been the card that, yeah. And that's gonna draw out the Hero's Downfall from Max. Now if you're Max, he's gonna. I'm almost certain Max jams the Elspeth here. He's gonna. Yep. Well,
had it.
Had that. It's dissolved. Cedric dropping to 8, I believe, on the attack though, is now under a fair amount of pressure. He drew a negate for the turn.
So you probably have to play one of the Aetherlings here.
Well, your opponent's tapped out. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's pretty good time for an Aetherling.
You know Max's hand is Revelation, right?
Yeah. So Max there chose to kind of like in his ideal world, he wanted to trade the Elspeth for the Aetherling.
Right.
That's a pretty aggressive trade if that would have happened.
Absolutely.
And he's going to. So he had 2 mana up. His question is whether or not he wants to syncopate for 1 here. Okay. He's
Well,
going to Revelation for 3 with 2 mana up, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, I think he thinks that he was going to syncopate a dissolve, but it's actually Gainsay that's hitting this. So
Well, oh, and this is on his turn. I was thinking if this was on the end step, then he could untap and kill Aetherling. A little bit of, I think he forgot which counterspell was in Cedric's hand. He saw the 3 mana and said it was dissolve. But Cedric used the, back when he took the card, he took the dissolve and not the Gainsay.
Yeah, the 3 mana wasn't dissolve, it was Gainsay and an Aetherling activation.
Right.
And playing it at, this pace to try and finish the game in time, Max, a little misstep there. Cedric gets the Aetherling in, a hit. Blink it back out to block the Sin Collector. Dissolve for Max, not going to help against an already onboard Aetherling.
And now
Sin
Collector
decided that he did not want to live this miserable life any longer.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the bluff is there, but
and there we go.
Cedric pulls out the match 2-1, managing one of the few times to complete, I think, 3 Esper games in a 50-minute clock.
Yeah, and that first game was not short.
Yeah.
But the post-war games go so much faster once you have way less dead cards in your deck.